President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on the world to remember the journalists killed while covering the war in Gaza. He says South Africa's case against Israel is to ensure that the people of Israel and Palestine find a lasting peace as well. Ramaphosa was speaking at the funeral service of renowned photographer and activist Dr. Peter Makubane.
As we bid farewell to one of our own legendary journalists and artists and photographer, I ask that we remember the more than 100 journalists and photographers and media workers who have been killed in Israel's genocidal war on the people of Gaza. Indeed, bearing witness to the truth is a revolutionary act. Standing firm for justice is what must define our humanity, and that must also define our own nationality. As we lay Bra Peter to rest today, the International Court of Justice in The Hague will tomorrow begin hearings in the proceedings brought by South Africa against the State of Israel for its crimes committed against the Palestinian people. Our opposition to the ongoing slaughter of the people of Gaza has driven us as a country to approach the International Court of Justice as a people who once tasted the bitter effect of dispossession, discrimination, removals, racism, and state-sponsored violence. We are clear that we will stand on the right side of history. It is our fervent hope that just as we are able to reconcile to make peace, that the peoples of Israel and Palestine will find a lasting and just peace as well.
All right, so SABC News correspondent Alex Cardia now joins us live from Brussels just to give us a sense of what we can expect ahead of that ICJ case by South Africa against Israel. Alex, good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. Well, we see President Cyril Ramaphosa has reiterated, that South Africa is heading to the International Court of Justice based on principle as it seeks justice for Palestinians. Just talk to us through how the two-day public hearings, which are starting tomorrow, of course, will unfold as both Israel and South Africa face off.
Yeah, well, tomorrow, Thursday morning, the first hearing will take place, the start of this landmark historic legal action brought by South Africa to the International Court of Justice. The 15 ICJ judges will be joined by one Palestinian judge and one Israeli judge, bringing that total to 17. They will hear the opening arguments from South Africa's legal team tomorrow on Thursday in favor of what we call preliminary measures. So that would be what the conditions are on Israel whilst this case is ongoing. One of those conditions could be the International Court of Justice ordering Israel to cease all military action until a verdict is reached. Now, that will be the opening arguments in favor from South Africa on Thursday, and then the following day, on Friday, the Israeli legal teams will defend their case, pushing against these preliminary measures, either by arguing against them or by saying the court does not have jurisdiction to rule on these matters. That will be the time frame, and then certainly those preliminary measures, a decision will come in a matter of days, more likely a matter of weeks. But the case itself, a case about that 1948 Convention on the Prevention of Genocide, may take years really to reach a verdict.
So when one looks at, South Africa's 84-page submission, and in its case to prove genocidal acts against Israel, it also bears bare, the humanitarian crisis in detail since the 7th of October attack. I mean, how crucial will this information be as it highlights, on the blockade on food, the destruction of essential health services for mainly pregnant women and babies, and also as it stands? I mean, it's important to note that aid agencies are reporting that more than 85% of Gaza's 2.3 million people people have been displaced. Just talk to us about what then the document entails in as far as that.
Yeah, certainly we've seen that testimony from aid agencies, from envoys who have been able to go into the Gaza Strip, saying that the humanitarian situation on the ground is nothing short of a catastrophe. That much is clear. But in this legal case, of course, the bar for proving something as serious as a breach of that 1948 Genocide Convention, that bar to prove that is very high indeed. There are two aspects. One is genocidal acts. Of course, the South African legal team feel they have a strong case because of some of Israel's actions to prove that fact, but there is also the necessity to prove that a genocide was intended. That intent will be certainly the challenge from the South African legal team's perspective, to prove intent on behalf of the Israeli government to commit these acts and to breach that convention. That will be complicated. We know the submission includes mentions of Israeli cultural figures who have clearly called for acts that would be likened or similar to what the allegations are by the South African team. That will be the big challenge. Intent is difficult to prove. We have seen some extreme statements from certain Israeli ministers that would be closer to some of the claims made by the South African government. But of course, that final decision, adjudicating on the acts and adjudicating on the intent, will be up to those 17 judges.
And in fact, just in terms of what is contained in South Africa's, document, in as far as you can, you saying in terms of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's statement, I mean, on the 7th of October, just in the beginning of that attack, he said Israeli soldiers understand the scope of the mission and stand ready to defeat the bloodthirsty monster who have risen against Israel to destroy us. Now, of course, we know, what is contained in parts in terms of this document. One wonders then what Israel's strategy will be as it defends itself over accusations of genocide. I mean, if anything, of the comments that were made by Israel straight after South Africa launched its submission, they were, scathing, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very strong pushback from Israeli officials using an anti-Semitic trope, in fact, calling it blood libel. That was the first statement from Israeli spokespeople, and then saying that actually the legal action made South Africa complicit in the Hamas terrorist attack of the 7th of October. Now, extremely strong language from the Israeli government. Now, looking at that legal strategy, one of the issues we can expect to see is the explanation that although civilian loss of life has happened, there will be no denial of that, of course, but certainly seeing it more as an unfortunate and unavoidable consequence of this conflict. And that will be the defense by Israel, making it clear that they had no intent, certainly, to commit atrocities of the scale that South Africa is claiming. That will be the core of that Israeli defense. And I was speaking to an Israeli former diplomat just a few moments ago who said the feeling, politically at least in Israel, is one of disgrace in the face of this lawsuit, saying that actually that Israel had been the victim of a terrorist attack by Hamas where more than 1,000 Israeli civilians were killed, and so hence the force of that response. But legally speaking, they will focus on the fact that civilian deaths, though unfortunate, are just collateral damage in this conflict.
Now, Alex, of course, very quickly, if you can tell us, we are understanding and hearing, of course, there is talk that there will be, protests that will be taking place across the globe on the sidelines of these hearings.
Yeah, absolutely. And this case will really concentrate and focus a lot of those, both sides of this argument. It is possibly the most polarizing conflict in the world today, not just between Palestinians and Israelis, but within societies over in South Africa, here in the European Union, in the UK, in the United States. We have seen strong protests, strong divisions along the polarized and divided lines of this conflict, and that will certainly be the case. I imagine security around the Peace Palace, around the International Court of Justice in The Hague will be very, very tight, but we have seen, particularly on social media, a lot of protests, a lot of demonstrations being organized around the world in support of this case and also expressing their opposition to it. So it'll be a tense few days in The Hague to come.